Hello, Mark.
Hello, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. Delighted to have you on this episode, and thank you so much. Well, why don't we start off, Mark, by you telling everyone a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Yes, so I've worked in social care for the last 15 years. Started off as a residential care worker, and then for the last 13 years have been managing services, either home care, both for the local authority or privately based, residential learning disability care homes, and reablement services, which is what I'm currently doing.
Great, fantastic. So let's get straight in by talking about cultivating relationships with local authority people and commissioners. What advice have you got?
I think for anybody listening that might own or manages a private, whether it's home care or a residential care home, that wants to have a contract with the local authority on a spot basis, it would be to find out who the key decision makers are. I think quite often we spend time talking to people, maybe at the placement team or people that don't have the authority. And I think you definitely need to go straight into the people that have the authority. Otherwise, you end up kind of going around the houses and not getting anywhere. And by the time you do have that conversation, the answer could be a no. So I definitely think it's finding out the key people. And I think it's making yourself known to them, who you are, what your service is, and your USP, unique selling point, and what your service can do to meet the needs of the people that you obviously want to support. It's just being honest about, I think quite often in my experience, I've worked alongside people, as I've come through my career that, have not lied to commissioners, but have told commissioners kind of what they want to hear. And ultimately, then it kind of never works out because the commissioners find out. And yeah, it's just been about being honest, transparent, saying what you can deliver, what you can't deliver, and just having those raw, honest conversations, because I think then less goes wrong. And if something does go wrong, then you've been fully upfront and transparent about it. I think commissioners do understand that, for example, the pandemic, you might have staff that are self-isolated, or sick, or, have got COVID, and actually just having those open conversations and saying how it's going to impact you in your service is better than just trying to hide it and tell them everything's okay, and then further down the line be found out that actually it's not okay.
Yeah, yeah. And in terms of communicating with them, staying in touch. So let's say you've found that key decision makers, having a relationship with them, having a communication with them. How do you use phone, email, real live meetings or not? We all know how busy these people are. Often they can be difficult to contact. I mean, the care operators I speak to, whole variety of different relationships they might have with them. Some they might know very well, others more distant, others very difficult to get a working relationship with. How do you go about it? How do you go about that contact? Is it face to face, email, phone? How do you go about it?
I think pre-pandemic days, it definitely would have been face to face, and I definitely think if you can, then face to face is better. I think you can sit with somebody, they can see your body language, your eye contact, you can connect with somebody a lot easier. And I think the problem with email is that messages can be misconstrued and taken the wrong way. I think it's easy for somebody to ignore your email. It's in their inbox. They're obviously very busy people, so your email probably isn't the priority of replying to. And I think there's thousands of private providers out there and people looking for their support. So your email is going to get lost. I think obviously during the pandemic, I think the best way, if you can, is to contact them now on the telephone. It's not safe to go and meet them face to face, and just have that conversation. And I think it comes back to what we're talking about being honest and about what your USP is and why your service would be the one that is the better service to, for them to place somebody with, whether that's in or residential.
Yeah. Now, and what do you do, or would you advise if you try the phone, you do the email, and you aren't able to have a conversation? What kind of strategies might you use then on those kind of occasions?
I think for me, and I've definitely been there, it would be to send a weekly email with, I did it in residential, so I would send a weekly email with how many bed vacancies I had, with a story of the week of what something that we had done above and beyond, or something that had gone really well. So there was kind of a visual kind of storytelling to it, as well as being honest about, actually we've got this vacancy. And I think the same with home care, was letting them know that actually we've got capacity in the postcoded areas, but not just, the area, like really drill down into the specifics of where they are. Because I think sometimes you can have an area, like I could say Essex, but Essex is so big. And even if I drill down to where I live in Chelmsford, Chelmsford's still a large area. So really drill down into the local area. I think don't be afraid of, looking elsewhere. If you've tried and you're not getting any response from the local authorities, look at the next, the neighbouring local authority. And, from experience, I've had, 3 or 4 different local authorities placing people into services. So, I think it also from a contingency point of view, not having all your balls in one basket, or your eggs in one basket is the saying, isn't it? Is that if that local authority provider suddenly pulls the plug on you, you've still got people that are placed outside of them. So from a business point of view, it makes sense as well.
Yeah, sure. No, that makes sense. I love this idea of the weekly email. And I some of the operators that we help out, and something I do strongly advise is to do exactly that email. However, you talk about the the number of vacancies that you have. But also, as you mentioned, the part I really like was that storytelling. So, because how we've helped care operators, and these are very, very well received, is that we will send those commissioners, those key influencers and stakeholders, and professionals, whether that be the commissioners, whether that be the hospital personnel, or other, key GPs and nurses, all those who are actually involved in a elderly person's care, an email. And that email would be all about the wonderful things that are happening within that care service. And it's usually it's always from an individual. So it's always from, in this case, if it's a care home, it might be the manager, and it has their photo. And that email, we call an e-shot, is literally celebrating all the good news that's happening at that care home. Because I can tell you is that all those professionals that you are working with, they will enjoy and like to know all the good news that's happening in a particular service. And those e-shots that we send out, they are opened and they are read, and they often get responses, because professionals do like to see and celebrate the good news of your care homes, the storytelling that you were talking about. And I think this is absolutely key, because your commissioners and local authority people and professionals don't want to be bombarded necessarily with, a marketing or sales pitch always. But if you're getting noticed by celebrating the good, wonderful things that you are doing, that's another way to make sure your service is top of mind, front of mind for those key local authority personnel. And it's a way that's doing it is without basically selling or marketing. It's just literally getting noticed by your good news. So I'm glad you mentioned that. It's great to hear that you're using that strategy, because I think it's one that's very, very, very valuable.
Yeah, no, and I think a lot of the commissioners that I've liaised with and worked closely with over the years, they all seem to like visual. I think it probably comes because they get so many emails full of, text, black and white text, that, actually something visual is very different. It can tell that email very quickly. So I think if you've got data, if you're a data-rich service, you send that data through and let them look at that, because that's what they like to see.
Yeah,
it is really just putting it in front of them, so they haven't got to take time. They can just look at it, think, wow, this is good, and then roll with it. And I think if you're a private or a startup home care company, don't be afraid to bombard. I think, definitely in my early days of some of the home care companies that I set up for people, was that you didn't get a response, but I used to send emails every day. I would call all the time, because I used to think in my head that at some point or other, they're going to get fed up of me calling an emailing, and they will eventually give you a package of care, just to keep you quiet. And then you've got one, and then you can, do an excellent and amazing, outstanding job looking after that person. And you can go back to them and say, look, this is what we've done. This is the reviews that we're getting, the feedback that we're having about the staff that are looking after. These are the outcomes. And again, if you've got any data around that, providing that data, just being honest, I think once you've got, people from the local authority that you're supporting or from hospital, is if they don't need that amount of care, is being honest and reducing the amount of care that they need. Because I think that kind of flows both ways, because then when you're asking for more hours, it's more evident that actually it goes both ways, that actually if they didn't need it, you would always be honest and reduce the package. Actually, when you do need more, that you do actually need it.
Yeah, I really like this, because this idea of, the first thing you have to do is to get, especially if you're starting from scratch, is to get noticed. And to start a relationship, and by being persistent in the way that in the way that you're talking about, is a way to get noticed. And then once you've got noticed, and then you can start beginning a relationship, and then you can start building a service relationship and a professional relationship, and then you've got through that door.
Yeah, definitely. I think once you've built that base of a key customer, your first customer, and being able to build on that is your first building block. And I think from there, it kind of just flows. Once you're in, and you can sell all the positives of everything. And if something does go wrong, it's just being open and transparent about what went wrong and the lessons learned. And I think they appreciate that.
Yeah.
As well is utilising the networks around you, phoning the care provider down the road and asking if they know who the key contact is. Or, there's so many Facebook groups for managers, is putting a message in there and seeing if they know, because actually somebody will know, and it might shortcut some of the time if you phone it around trying to find that out, if you can get that information straight away.
Yeah, and let's talk about, so we're obviously during this pandemic, the face-to-face is harder and it's more difficult, etc. Where does that leave this relationship building? What's kind of replaced it, or how have you maneuvered around it?
Yeah, I think the pandemic has definitely thrown a few curveballs in the way. I think for me, it is highlighting the positives. So just saying when something has gone right. So whether that's that actually you were having a troubled time, and actually somebody within the local authority or the hospital teams went above and beyond and highlighting that. Because I think everybody likes a bit of a reward. And I think if you're kind of celebrating the local authority, or you're celebrating the hospital teams, people remember that, and I think they come back for that. And I think it is just being open and honest. If you've got something that's going wrong or something that's not quite right, it's being honest, telling the commissioners, that it's not going right, what you're trying to do about it, and what the end result is hopefully there to look. I don't think you can go wrong with that, because I don't think then at any chance they can come back and say that they can't catch you about anything. You can't then be found for doing something you should have done, because actually everybody knows about it. And I think it's just, not utilising the time that you have with commissioners and the key decision makers when you can, as opposed to just having a meeting for a meeting's sake. You're better off having one a month and it being a really kind of focused, well-met meeting, as opposed to having 4 that month and they all being kind of bitty and not really getting you anywhere.
Yeah. And over the years that you've been working with local authorities, kind of what have you learned? So what have you learned that's enabled you to cultivate those relationships better? What kind of particular learning experiences you feel that you've had?
I think for me, I started off as a care worker, so I know exactly what it's like out and about, working online. I think that does help, because when you're having conversations, it's not just from a point of a business point of view. You can also then relate it back to every aspect within that service. So I've been a residential support worker, I've been a home care worker, I've done coordinating, been a senior or a supervisor, and a deputy manager, and then a registered manager. So at every point in those conversations, I can really relate to every aspect of the care business. I think having those conversations with people about actually this is what you're suggesting, but actually reality is, and the experiences that you can give, it's not going to work like that. And I think having that pushback and that honest conversation does help. And I think commissioners ultimately know, and people working in the hospital teams, they know whether something's going to work, and everybody's on tight budgets, and it might be that they're just pushing for something because it might save, a few pence or a few pounds. I do think they respect that honest pushback, and that, being, actually this isn't going to work, this is what we need for it to work. And I think sometimes they are so busy that actually they appreciate you coming in and enlightening them, because actually sometimes they are tunnel visions because they've got so much to do and so much on their plate that they don't have time to stop and look outside at what actually might be happening. And like, for example, right now with recruitment in social care, I think I've definitely spoken to commissioners up and down the country, and alongside my role with NACAS, is that I think they are so focused on trying to reduce the amount of people in hospital, find people either home care or a residential bed somewhere, that they weren't necessarily in the early days aware that there was such a recruitment crisis going on. And it was highlighting that and saying, actually, we've got Amazon that are paying X amount as, a joining bonus, and they're paying more than most care providers. And we've got McDonald's giving away, iPhone 13s, and actually bringing that information to the table and saying, this is the situation at the moment in the wider industry. What are we going to now do to sort social care? I think sometimes they like it when you bring kind of ideas to the table that they can then utilise that are tangible and they can work.
I see. Fascinating. And tell me about your. I know very little about this, but you will know a lot more than me. Is the day-to-day issue around fees and local authority fees and the care operators' fees and the money and the squeeze on budgets and everything that you alluded to previously. How those tricky conversations, how do you go about it?
Yeah, I think when it comes to money and budgets, obviously local authorities are, they are tight. We know that it's been well publicised in the media. The money from the government to the local authorities isn't enough for social care. And I think it's still sticking true to the values. So if your value is that you want to pay your staff a good wage, that it wants to be above the living wage, then actually sticking to that. And it might be that you have to take a couple of people that you support that are on the lower end of the pricing bracket that you would want, but then you can supplement that with a private person, or it could be that you just have to take a few kind of knocks in terms of the customer fee. I think it's sticking true to your values. So I think for me, when I look back and I opened one of the branches for a private organisation, I knew very much what I wanted the fee to be. I'd done competitor analysis, and I think that is definitely something that is key. You need to look at what your competitors are charging and what they're offering, because ultimately you want to be pitching yourself at the same rate, if not slightly higher, but offering a better service or offering something unique that they don't offer. I think for me, when I opened this home care branch, I knew that the majority of the other providers were private, so I knew that's kind of the route I wanted to go down. But then the local authority came and they said, look, we're really struggling. But to me, my value was that at the time we were paying care workers £11 an hour, and that was 6 years ago. Yeah, about 6-7 years ago. So most other most other providers in the area were on, like £8-9 an hour. So we were a lot higher. But the value to me was that all care workers should be paid, a lot more than they are now. And I think in my ideal dream world, I wish that they were on at least £15 an hour.
Yeah.
I'd have those honest conversations with commissioners and say, look, we're paying our care staff £11 an hour. This is what the business looks like. And again, it goes back to using that data. We've got to pay for pension, we've got to pay for holiday and sick leave and bits and pieces. And this is ultimately what it costs to deliver the care. And actually, we want to, out of that pot, we still want to upskill our workforce. We want to train them and give them qualifications. We want them to, be nurtured so that actually they can deliver better care. So actually, out of that pot of money, we need to take off X amount, because actually that's going to go for the training and development. And then you're left with an amount that you can get. I think when commissioners and key decision makers can see that, and it's not just a figure that's plucked out of the air, because I think sometimes when you go to a commissioner and say, oh, we want to charge £20 an hour or £30 an hour, it seems like a lot of money, especially if they're paying, £14-15 for a block provider. So I think having that kind of data to hand, that information, that visual really helps you to be able to, to get that sale across.
Great. I mean, fascinating, and thanks for sharing that. Well, this is great, Mark. Some really useful information, tips, and advice here. What would you like to convey that we've not conveyed so far?
And the only other thing is having that personal touch with a key decision maker. So it doesn't always have to be business. So it could be pre-pandemic days, it could be that you turned up to the hospital to the key decision makers with a tray of donuts or cakes for the team, because I think they remember those small things. Or it could be that actually you go to your local authority and you arrange a meeting and you don't have to talk business. You could just, ask how they are. So many key decision makers are on social media these days, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, so you can kind of see what their personal life is about and actually utilise that. if you can see from LinkedIn or one of their social medias that they like gardening, I know it kind of borders on a bit stalkery, but if you know that they love gardening, is have a conversation about plants, like get to know the person and build that personal relationship. It doesn't necessarily have to be about business every time.
Yeah.
And it might actually just want to drop an email on a Friday afternoon saying, just wanted to drop you a quick message. Hope you have a lovely weekend. Let's hope the weather stays nice, or something like that. It doesn't have to be, like a sales pitch the whole time. It could just be a generic, email at the end of the week or beginning of the week asking how the weekend is. But I think it's just got to have that personal touch.
Oh, I love that. I think that all makes a difference. We all like we all like the personal touch. If we receive it,
Definitely.
we'll remember it. And you and I probably, I think about the people I am work with and the people who are trying to develop a work relationship with me. The amount of personal touches I get, very, very little. So when I do get one, I'll notice it. If someone is trying to build a relationship with me, and this is a massive tip for anyone, and they're really important. If you can come in with something about that reflects that you're just a human and interested in their life, and you found out something about them, and you can reflect that, then that makes a huge difference and can help you get noticed and to start to build a relationship. I mean, it's a great piece of advice you've given him here, and something I hope the listeners will take note of.
Yeah, I think if there's any managers listening, I think they do a great job of valuing the workforce. And I would say whatever you are doing to value your workforce, take that and implement the same idea to the key decision makers and the commissioners, because it 100% works. That whole kind of putting a protective ring around somebody and showing them that you've thought about them and that it does work. And I think, like you said, it just shows that, at the end of the day, they are human, they are a person, and actually everybody likes to receive a compliment every now and again. And actually, it's not just a request that you want something from them, that actually you're giving something back to.
And what you've talked about here, that there's their digital footprint somewhere. They're going to be somewhere on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter. They're going to be somewhere, and you can find out about them, and you can have a conversation with them through those means. So this is absolutely great. Well, I'm glad I asked you that question. Is there anything else you would like to say that I missed out? That you missed?
On building and developing relationships, not that I can think of. I really think that we quite often do talk about the negatives, and it is a good point to raise the compliments and the positives. Like if something's gone well, and it doesn't have to be in your own company or your own team. It could be that you're working closely with the hospital, and actually the hospital team have done something really well, or the placement team have supported. It might be that actually you can't support a person anymore because their needs have changed, and the placement team have gone above and beyond and found a new service really quickly, which has really helped everybody out, and ultimately the person in the middle of everything. But actually, it's just sending that email to the placement team, copying everybody in, sending it to the manager, but copying the team, just saying, how amazing it was, because I think they remember that. Those small compliments go a long way.
Yeah, that's great. Listen, Mark, this is wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
So, just finally, then, if people would like to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Yes, so the best place would be to find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. So my Twitter handle is @_Mark_Tot. And on LinkedIn, if you just put my name Mark Tot, you will soon find me, hopefully.
Yeah, well, Mark, for those listeners, Mark is one of those who's very prominent on LinkedIn. He's really shares a lot of great information, advice, and we love to see people in the care sector enjoying what they're doing, celebrating what they're doing, and trying to make a positive impact in the world of care. And Mark is certainly one of those. So thanks very much, Mark, for everything you're doing, and thanks for being on this episode.
Thank you very much for having me.